streaming now, Brandon.
Absolutely. That's how we're going to start. But maybe you should
Did you?
tell everyone. Why don't you tell everyone about your lock story? I think that's a good story.
Oh,
It's like, it's a little
I,
parenting pro tip.
I had a very Amsterdam problem where so my daughter Alejandra, she's got a kid bike, and over time, what happens is when she's pedaling, she bends the key that goes in her I forget what they call it, it's a U-lock. We don't have these kind of locks in America, but if you imagine the back wheel and you screw on this lock thing, and then there's a big metal bar that you can push down that goes through the wheel and connects to it, right? So basically the wheel doesn't work anymore. It's just like a big circle, if you imagine. I'll have to find a picture of it, but this is like a very Dutch lock. Every single bike has this lock. And I was thinking this morning, I think you can tell that you're buying a stolen bike if it doesn't have a lock or it has a brand new lock on it. And so I was thinking through all the bikes that we've purchased, and I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty sure that one was stolen and that other one was probably stolen, right? Because anyways, so it's like on every single bike. Now, so the key sticks out because you put the key in it and the key sticks in there while you're biking. And then so when you lock it, you can pull the key out, right? Which is actually, this lock, there's a lot to say about this lock, but it is very ingeniously designed, right? Because it shows you how fit into just the daily life routine biking is in the Netherlands, where you're going to take your key, and it's probably your keychain thing, and you're not going to be using your keys while you're biking, so you might as well have it stuck in the bike, and it's going to stay there, and then you bike around, and then when you're done, you need your keys, so you unlock the bike, and then you have your keys back, right? So consequently, you do see people who just have their whole keychain stuck into this thing, right, with their Albert Heijn discount card and things like that. So anyways, the key sticks out there, but because of her height and the bike's a little short, like her what do you call that? Her heel hits it every now and then, and slowly the key gets bent. And so usually I have to go in there and bend the key so it's straight. But this time she couldn't get it out, and I was trying to bend the key and it broke off in the lock there. And I managed to stick my knife in there and turn it anyways and stuff like that. But then I gave her a combination chain that we have. It's got a built-in combination lock, which is very rare in the Netherlands. People don't really use that. They use key locks. I think I covered several years ago when I moved here. I asked the lock guy I was buying a chain from. I said, "How come people don't use combination locks?" And he was like, it's as if he had never contemplated that question. and the only thing he said is I guess people are afraid someone might figure it out, just walk by it and guess every day. And I just kind of laughed and walked away, and I was like, yeah, I don't think they're going to try 300 to 1,000 days. That's sort of just like with any lock, what they'll do is bring some bolt cutters and then take your shit, right? There's
nothing complicated about it. Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, but then I forgot to tell her the combination. So I was a little worried how she's going to get home, but she hopped on the back of my son's bike, and apparently her butt was hurting from riding on the back of his bike because he doesn't have a pad up there on the rack on the back. And she got dropped off in the park and walked the rest of the way home. And so I think, thankfully, since we're recording a podcast, I bet she came home and was going to yell at me about why did I do this and why did I do that, and maybe stomp her feet and throw things around. But now she'll probably be cool, and she'll roll her eyes at me, and that'll be that.
All right. I think it's good. That was good. You good with that open? We'll use that as the open?
Totally. I didn't really have anything else to talk about.
Yeah, no, it's good. I mean, I guess I didn't when I said go. I don't know if it was clear to you, but yeah, it worked out. That'll be a good thing. I was just thinking
I'll send out
to myself. It was in some ways, you are corporate security, right? And your employees are Cormac and Alejandro. And it's you gave them the thing, right, that made in their situation their bike, but in most of us it's usually our computer. You made it unusable, but then amongst themselves they're like, our corporate IT department security person has made it unusable. Let's find a workaround, right? And they're like, okay. And it's just like, that's how it works. And so when she's walking home, she's probably just thinking like, we all think of the corporate IT group when like the mandatory image, roll out and the patches go. And it's like 30 minutes of just like, you don't even know what's happening to your computer.
Yeah.
She's probably on her bike home. Like, it'd be great if my father would just give me what I need to do my job, in this case, ride home. And so but you can maybe spin that as when they're, if they're lecturing you later, be like, I'm preparing you for life. This was a little bit about corporate America. So
yeah,
I like that.
yeah.
I like that.
I mean, to put it another way, don't get me started on the October 18th, 2022 Great Zero Trust shift over in VMware corporate security. Boy, is it delightful. It's really really right up there. I think I don't know. It's actually, it's one of, like, you must know, like, you must have some thoughts on this, Brandon. Like, what is your advice? Let's do a little advice segment here. Do I need to go corporate managed on my personal device, or just put up with the annoyance by not having it be corporate managed? I just feel like, here's my concern, is I just feel like I know they say nothing bad is going to happen, and I'm that's probably true. But then what if Elon Musk buys our company? Like, isn't the first thing he's going to bring his SpaceX people in, and they're just going to like immediately like download all of our phones' personal data and browser history and text messages, and like, run it on his like William Gibsonian satellite farm somewhere? Like, I feel like, and then we'll like have some sort of like lawsuit against it, and he'll just be like, yeah, I eat this shit for breakfast. See ya on Mars, motherfucker. Right? Like, it doesn't seem like you ever want to like just like sign over a corporation to like, have your stuff. And yet I guess I happily do it with Apple. But like, I don't know.
But that's different. Like you are paying in the relationship with Apple in most cases, right? You are paying for, you are the consumer, they are the provider. And so their interests are aligned with you. What I mean, saying, it's like,
right,
I'm using iMessage. They told me it's secret, and there's no like, you haven't signed any additional agreement. They're not paying you to do work, and therefore they have, rights to see all your messages. So I do think, I guess my own personal philosophy on this is like, I kind of have like, it's probably more complicated than it needs to be, but it's sort of like, at this point, like, I buy my own phone, an iPhone, right? Defaults lifestyle. So I buy that and I pay for that service like myself, just like I don't expense it and things like that, because I just want my world separate from a corporate world, because my phone just has like, like everyone's phone, it has everything. It just everything. Like, I don't know. It's not like there's anything super secret, but it's like, it is my like entire private life, is like contained within it. So I would prefer to just buy that and own that. And then the company, it doesn't happen as much anymore because there's so much on like virtual stuff. But like, if someone wants to call me, it's fine. I just, I'll take the phone call. It's not like, oh, I need you to call my corporate number. And then I will make case by case decisions around like, if the corporation allows me to install apps on the phone, right? I'll kind of like, size up what the app does, what the value of it is versus, so I won't just like take the phone and put all the corporate stuff on there, right? I'd be like, I don't know if I really need that. I can find some other way to do it. Like, if I have a laptop with me or something, like to check email, like that's a big thing too. It's sort of like, and also too, keeping some of the corporate stuff sort of like keeps your life divided. So that's one thing I do. Yeah. And then on the computer side, I don't know, it's like it's more complicated, but I think, most companies, like, there's always the corporate issued computer. And I think it's always important to have that, and have that 100% pristine, leave it just used for corporation stuff, right? And that is the company's sanctioned way to interact with the company, right? There's that. And then now, of course, they pick all the tools and they manage it. But then I usually will also have my own personal computing set up that I have the tools that I want. And then most companies today are now utilizing something in the cloud. So you can like get the files that you want, and interact and have them secured through the corporate structure of like whatever it is, Dropbox or OneBox or, Microsoft. And then, maybe I'll work on that, but there's a little bit of bleeding there where it's like, I want to use the tools and the computing setup that I'm used to. I know the company doesn't want to provide that to me necessarily, but I'll just kind of use the file share, right? But then sometimes if I realize the company wants me to like log into a certain thing, a certain way, in a VPN, right, then I'll go use my corporate device for that. But it's kind of minimal, right? It's sort of like, oh, I got it if I need it, but I sort of want to work the way that I want to work. So kind of like different varying degrees of like making myself productive and also keeping control of the stuff that is important to me. And then of course, yeah, like whatever, and on any corporate device, like I totally get it. It's like they've given it to me. Anything you put on there is fair game. So I try to like, I do my best to like, just leave it to make it 100% corporate wherever possible. Like we all
Well,
have
that makes sense for
the moment,
for,
right?
for a
So,
company issued device, you can have it be managed.
but I think it's like maybe the thing about it is like kind of it's a little bit of bring your own device kind of stuff. Like most companies that have something they'll let you do. So it's like, bring your own PC and just interact with stuff just like your phone, right? But then, like that's kind of the gray area. But I like to have those things set up because then I can just have everything that I want just on my setup, right? Because I don't know how many times where it's like, I want to use this, I want to edit an image. I know you're not going to buy me the image editing software I want. I already have it. I just gonna, you know what I mean? I'm going to use what I want to use, or the recording software, or whatever, right? Or microphones and things like that. So it's like, I think that's just part of life. Now, I know different corporate IT people would be like, a very draconian security is like, no, you can only use this device. Anything you touch outside of that is now becomes ours because you're working on a different device. It's like, no, that's just not the way it works. I don't see it that way.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, security is like one of those things you can't really like, say is going too crazy because then people will be like, oh, but what if this and what if that? And it's just like, I mean, I have to imagine that the ROI spreadsheets for like security vendors are just like full of craziness, right? You like because it's like I was writing this somewhere the other day that like it's already I was thinking about like cloud finance management, and like it's one thing to just like reduce costs and try to get the cheapest option, but then it's also like how do you put a value on some IT things? And also like the more commodity some IT services, the harder it is to value. Like, well, what's the business case for scheduling meetings? Like sure, you can compare and contrast Office 365 and Google Suite and other email things, and you can kind of get the cheapest one, but like never mind the cheapest one, like what if we don't have it at all? Like what does that number look like? And it's obvious the way that companies work nowadays. If you didn't have email and scheduling, the company wouldn't function. And so like where does that fit in the spreadsheet? Like how do you like in this? And it was making me think of security, because security is the same way. It's just like, well, what if evil people got all of our data? And you can't just be like, oh, I don't know, that's worth like $500 million, right? And they'll be like, no, the entire company burns down, right? In the same way that like if we wanted to save some money, we could just like not have email and calendaring and probably save a lot of money and also have some security fixes. But like then the entire company would burn down. So there's almost like there's no ROI on email and security. It's just sort of like you need it, right? And like I don't know. That's where a lot of security stuff gets frustrating, because you can't really make the case that like, yeah, we're more secure, but now it sucks, right? Like it's like it's very frustrating as an end user. Like I maybe even like a different version of this is everyone's favorite Concur or expense management. You can probably figure out the ROI on not making that a better experience, right? Like you can be like, if filing expenses was actually easy and quick, and it worked out well, one, we wouldn't reject so many expenses and people wouldn't get expensing fatigue. So they would either just not expense things or they would not buy things. So we would end up spending more money. And then two, if we have a better user experience for expensing, one, we're going to have to pay all the money to cut over to that. And that's probably going to be a 1 to 2 year program. And we're going to have to recertify and recompliance everything. And then two, I bet the ROI for this new thing is that it made people more productive so that they could charge a premium instead of the amount that our other people were paying, right? Like, and so like, you probably can make a spreadsheet if you're like the existing incumbent expense people that you are helping people make money. However, you could also say like, well, what if we didn't have an expensing system and people couldn't buy anything? What's the ROI? What's the ROI in letting people buy stuff?
All right, Kute, hey, let's because I'm gonna make that whole segment like the after show right after that.
Oh, okay.
So we'll just make that whole thing. So like, let's.
I thought this was the show. Okay.
It was, I know, but then I was like, well, how am I going to edit this together? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that little part And because I think it's a good after show. And you know what I'm gonna tell everyone right now is like, because if you're having security problems, you should go see our friends at Teleport. And if you listen to the podcast, they just heard the ad for Teleport. So everyone, go check out Teleport. So that'll be good though. That'll be a little, that's a nice little bonus. I mean, maybe I'll even call it bonus after show. I'll come up with some exciting titles. See if anyone actually listens past that final ding. So, all right. So just do this then. Give me whatever topic you want to go to next. Just assume like the last thing they heard will be like, Alejandra's bike or something like that. And then we'll pick up from there.
Oh boy. Okay. All right. Well,
no, it should be fresh. Like you don't need to connect it back. Just
sure.
Whatever topic you want to go to.
Of course. I mean, there's two things thinking about this week that I was hoping you could help me sort out. One of them, I think I've got it sorted out. Is the usual thing with this is in the share price equals story times revenue or whatever corner, and
valuation, right?
So I want to have just a Brandon concise to the point ruling. So is the public cloud business shrinking or not? What's going on there?
Well, I think the consensus of all of this is that it is growing slower than previous quarters. For the most part, Amazon, Google, and Microsoft all grew at a slightly slower rate. Usually they're off by 1 or 2% from the previous years. And so the reason that matters is that for the most part, I mean, we probably go back in time and find the initial earnings that originally came out. There was probably when all this stuff got started, I'm sure the growth rates sort of took a while to settle in. But for the most part, everything has been increasing their growth rates year over year for a long time, right? But now we're in this situation that everyone is talking about, some type of economic decline, potential recession, things like that. And as an indicator of that, for the most part, all of the major hyperscalers are growing slightly slower. Now, it's always this weird thing. These businesses are still growing at a very high rate. So we just looked at it like an absolute term, and I was just like, hey, wouldn't you like to have a $80 billion business growing at, high double digits over year? You'd be like, yeah, that sounds like fantastic. But if you compare it to the relative growth rates before, we're starting to see, a little bit slower. And now, of course, the real answer is nobody really knows, right? I mean, that's the honest answer. The answer is we all know there will be some type of economic uncertainty ahead. So people are buying less. But I think as a long-term trend, it's kind of like investing in the stock market in general. It's this probably doesn't have much long-term consequences. We'll just look back on it and be like, oh, it grew a little bit less, but it's not now, it's not like suddenly things start declining, right? Like people are moving out of the cloud, and we talked about that kind of thing and things like that. So it's more. I just would say you can almost think of cloud spending as just a global economic indicator. For us, it would be almost like what do they talk about, inflation and things like that. We can probably just look at this and just see, because the numbers are so big now. It's just sort of are people still buying milk? It's like consumer goods, right? It's just kind of gives you a global indicator. It's not like people are going to stop buying milk. It just gives you an indication of what people are doing. So,
right.
So I think it's sort of the businesses are still good. They're not growing as fast, but they're still growing pretty in a healthy way. None of the major three have changed: Amazon, Microsoft, and Google. They're all in the same order. So there isn't any changing there. So I think it's just more business as usual. And hopefully this economic recession, or if it is a recession, will end, relatively quickly for all of us, so that we don't have to be thinking about the negative stuff going forward.
Sorry, there's some urgent interruption here.
Okay.
What is it? Window cleaners. Can you ask them? Jesus, it's not your fault at all. Don't worry about it. I got to go pay the window cleaners.
I'm
sorry.
All right, we'll take a short break here.
Here, Alejandra, do you want to talk to my friend Brandon?
Who's Brandon?
She doesn't have to.
Here, sit down and do an interview for the streamers.
No. I'm doing it.
Okay, Cormac will do an interview.
I want to say an interview. Ouch. How are they so small?
Cormac, how are you?
Good.
So I have some questions for you. Like we were talking, your father was giving me the details that, the bike lock broke, and that he provided your sister a bike lock but did not tell him the combination. Is this true? Is this how it went down at school?
Yes, this is what happened. Yes.
Okay, and so what do you think? What should have happened there? Looking back on this, like, do you know the combination to the lock?
No.
So your dad has not provided the combination lock to either you or your sister, but has given her the lock. So
Yes.
when she used the lock, did she know, like when she basically locked it in, that she wouldn't know what it was?
No, he forgot.
He forgot. But what about she? Like, what is there anything she could have done other than locking it up and then locking herself out of it? Was there another way to solve the problem?
No.
No. So in the end, this we always think about in like corporations, like doing a retrospective, like how could we have done better? Whose fault was the lock problem? His fault. Okay.
Yeah.
So we can put blame on him. Is that right?
Yes.
All right, Cormac. Well, thanks for jumping in. I appreciate it. Okay, well, we just did a blameless post-mortem. I was just teaching Cormac about that. And of course, the most important thing about a blameless post-mortem is we've came up with the person to blame right away. And not surprisingly, it was you. You were the person that was to blame. I asked, like, well, is there anybody, could Alejandro have like known what the lock was? Maybe she didn't use the lock.
Oh, yeah.
None of that. He didn't have any of that. He was like, nope. He didn't know the lock combination either. So the team has 100% agreed it's your fault. So now we can move forward.
We've identified the systematic problem here.
Yeah. So the systematic. So I don't know what the run book changes we will, because like, I guess don't give kids combination locks without the combination. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what the run book. I don't know how we're going to update the run back to fix this.
Will you take the dog on a walk? Please. Just be quick.
If we can have some candy.
You can have one piece of candy when you get back from the dog walk.
Oh, not one.
I got to record my thing here. Whew. Okay.
Okay, so let's see. What was the thing that I said?
We've got lots of bonus content for this episode.
This is gonna be. We're gonna edit this one together. Okay, so the Windows cleaners. So okay, but I would like we're talking about earnings.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I know
okay,
where
so
you were.
Okay, so just pick up after like I finished that sentence about
Yep.
something about earnings. Okay.
Yeah. So from reading through the little bit that we have, like it does seem like there's like a slight, even the statements that they had, there's like a slight decrease in maybe there's less buying than people anticipated, right? And there was some notes on like, less hiring freezes and things like that, which I guess we kind of hear here and there. Gets a little confusing, but I mean, as always, I feel like with these things, as you pointed out, it's sort of like, well, maybe the financial analysts should have like done some better work to forecast better. And like, there's this constant, on the other hand, it's not like people will say like, ooh, I don't like your forecast, we're going to do worse. But it's a continuing frustration I always have of like, as you like to remind me, that the share price is based on the future, not the present.
Right. And I think it's probably worth, a common thing we talk about in the show is, let's flip it around and be like, I think things haven't really changed and there's no, to me, there's no major action. But as we talk about all the time on the show about like, well, how much of the existing IT infrastructure has moved to the public cloud, right? So we know the public cloud providers would like us to believe, the story that they tell is everything's going to move, right? And it's like X trillions of dollars. And this is where Jeff Bezos has that famous quote. It's like the AWS market opportunity is uncapped, right? It's almost like infinite, right? And so all of that helps tell the story of like, wow, like if it's $80 billion today, that $80 billion could be like several trillion in the future. But when we compare that with like, okay, well, let's just take a look at what happened. It's like, you're still growing, but you're not growing as fast. So maybe that is an indication that like, hey, it isn't uncapped, so if we're 10%, like we've been joking, like recently everybody's just saying like, we've migrated 10% of the cloud. Maybe the upper bound is only 50%. Maybe it's only, what I mean? And maybe it's only 60%. And so that will play out over several years. So I think that's another important thing to think about.
Yeah. I mean, it's just a shift in the growth rates that gets now. This pairs up well. There's been some commentary about the Facebook or Meta or whatever. I actually ran into someone who works at Facebook the other day. We didn't talk about they introduced themselves as working at Meta, and it took me a little while to figure out what they were saying. But
like,
that's
where?
fine.
Huh?
Yeah. But this is another story. So Ben Thompson had he wrote up a piece like about myths about why Facebook stuff has been declining. Like it lost like is it that it lost 47% of value, or it's at 47% of its previous value? It kind of doesn't matter.
Yeah, well,
Right?
I think
Like,
it went from like almost $1 trillion to like 300 billion or something, is something like
right.
that. So yeah, it's lost
Right.
a lot of market cap.
And kind of like the discussion we were just having, when you read through his charts, it looks like, well, seems okay. They still have increases and things are going on. And so one, going back to the formula, like, I don't know anything about this, but like probably the whole like metaverse thing isn't helping, right? Like that seems like, I don't know if I've encountered anyone except Ben Thompson, who will talk about how he's used it firsthand and it's great. Who's like, yeah, that seems great. Good idea. I'm glad they're investing in that.
But I think we should let's separate the two things here, because I think a lot of people have commented on whether the metaverse is good or bad. And it's like, I don't know if we're bringing anything to the table, but I think I've always come back to, because of that famous picture of Meta, Facebook buying the Sun campus and keeping the Sun logo on the back as a reminder of like, hey, if you get complacent, you fail. And it's like, I just think of myself as like Meta and Sun different, you can kind of do some kind of interesting comparison. So let's just take the metaverse for a second and be like, Meta knows Meta is full of smart people who are thinking about the future. They're like, we need to grow our revenue. I don't know if this is controversial. I'm going to say that there were a lot of people that were really smart at Sun Microsystems around 2000 that were like, we need to find new ways to make more money that are not tied to Spark, right? I think that was a well-known problem with inside Sun. Just like I think we need to build things other than the Facebook app and advertising and Meta. Now, the question going forward, right, is like, because I think I know that sounds like, of course that's the case, right? Like, who would argue with that? But like, I think in retrospect, sometimes we go back and be like, the company that failed was stupid. They didn't see it coming. And I actually don't think that's the case. I think most of the time they see it coming, right? Now, the question is like, what is the big bet that they want to make? Now, at Sun, one of the big bets was open source software. If you remember, right before Sun, several years went by, but kind of the last big thing it did was it acquired MySQL. It was like, hey, let's get into open source. This is the future. This is how we're going to grow outside of that. And we were going to, embrace open source Linux, and we're going to become Solaris x86 and Open Solaris, right? So there were all these thoughts that at the time were like big, huge initiatives and bets. And people were like, I think people kind of felt like maybe it's too slow or it wasn't the right bet, but like people could see that. You could judge that and be like, this is what they're going to do. Now we know we can look back at Sun and say, none of those big initiatives led to replacing the growth of the Spark product line, right? But still, they tried, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And I think that's what Meta, because they've renamed the company and their whole push into with Oculus and the metaverse, that's what they're doing, right? Now, so it's just in time we're going to look back on this and know it was either a complete waste of money, right, or he seeded the market for what went on to be the next $1 trillion market cap for Meta, right? And and I think this is one of those things where it's like looking back in history, and this is the part where I just come to is like the corporate top-down initiative, because you need to grow. I feel like a lot of times it just doesn't. It doesn't have a long history, a track record of being really successful, because you could point to like IBM Watson, right? Like we're going to reinvigorate IBM around really literally curing cancer. Or Amazon came out and said, hey, we're going to change healthcare, right? Google came out with a bunch of different initiatives and they haven't taken off. So, that's, I think, the biggest reason to be skeptical is just to say, you're pushing this from the top down versus like, where did the success of Facebook originally came from? It sort of grew out of organic growth. And I think that's the biggest question going forward. And I think the same thing with like Solaris versus Linux, right? And things like that. Like Linux kind of grew out of organic growth. And, you couldn't just be like, hey, use Open Solaris, right? It's going to work. So that's, I think, kind of back to Ben Thompson's argument is like, Facebook is still a really profitable company. They're making lots of money. They're investing in the future. You may not like it, but they're still making lots of money. But you could have said the same thing about Sun and many other companies along the way. And what you found out, though, was like that was the high point, right? The high point was at this point, and then they just slowly decline over time, right? And I think that's exactly where Facebook finds itself.
Yeah, you know, and you bring up one of my favorite principles is that it's only stupid until it works. You know,
Right.
like you'll have to see if it pans out or not. And as long term listeners know, the mystery of what happened to Sun is one of my ongoing pet projects that I'll never get to. And you know, the other thing it makes me think is like, and I don't think this doesn't necessarily apply to Sun, but maybe counter to what all of your you know, your Hacker News and Y Combinator and you know, Valley Tech Think would say is like, you should make big bets, but you shouldn't tell anyone about it until it's successful, right? Like you know, Apple is kind of the version of this, where like they're probably well, see, and we don't even know, right? But like they you don't really have a sense of like they don't really talk about things until they're ready to sell them, and you know, maybe they have a car thing, maybe they don't. Like if Apple all of a sudden was like, well, we are spending, you know, I'm spending all my time as the CEO focusing on the car business that we're going to be starting up. Like, who knows how that would go? That would just be bonkers. Like, you know, especially if they were like, yeah, and we don't have one yet.
Right.
And so like, you know, similarly, and I guess they've been doing this for a while, but it seems like, you know, if you're going to make some big bet the company thing, it's probably good to only talk about it once you've already won the bet. Like, you know, or to figure out how close you can get, because then you're going to catch all of this flack about things. And, you know, in the best case, so to speak, when other things go wrong, people will like blame your distraction and stuff and talk about how the sizzle's gone and the culture's bad. And, you know, there's plenty of other places you could move your money.
Yeah, and I do think we could look at, you know, another way to approach this problem would be the old, you know, Clayton Christensen innovator's dilemma, and I think an innovator's solution. I think he would say something like, well, listen, what Facebook should do is just run its profitable businesses as it's doing. It should return those profits to shareholders, right? And go out, and then those shareholders can go invest in a new company called Meta, right? And let that company kind of sit to the side and go out and try to build out its own thing, but completely separate from, you know, this other advertising based social media company, right? And so, and let it kind of live and die on its own, you know, timeline, right? Because you're right. And I think all these corporate initiatives, and I think, you know, Watson from IBM always jumps to mind. It's like, you know, the executives feel this need to launch something at the next conference, even though it isn't tangible. It doesn't have this bottom up adoption, right? And after a while, once you do this once or twice, people start to really look at you as very skeptical, right? And that's sort of like, that's why you get like a site like Killed by Google, or, you know, people sort of, you know, making jokes about the vaporware and things along that line. So you got to be really, really careful. And I think you're right. And I think Apple probably more so than most, you know, kind of gets this. It's like, we probably won't see a set of glasses from Apple until they like do something that we're pretty amazed by, right? Like I'm sure when they were playing with the iPhone internally, and they were, you know, kind of showing it, they're like, we did it. Like they didn't have to explain it very much. Like, you know, I gave someone an iPhone. They were like, this is from the future. This is like 20 years from the future. I have nothing like this. I'm literally holding a Motorola Razr in my hand, and I'm holding an iPhone, and they like could not be more different, right? And I think that's sort of the, you know, the best case environment is that's what you're doing. And so just telling me an iPhone may eventually show up in 10 years, or rolling out a really kind of, you know, hard to use, ugly headset, whether that be Google Glass or Oculus, you know, it's just doesn't have the same effect. I think so when Apple does it, we all are going to expect it to be like, wow, this is fantastic. We weren't even sure we wanted it. Now we're going to pay you $1,000 for one of these.
Yeah. And as with all these you know, armchair strategy thinking here, like it's never like just one or the other all the time. It's just figuring out which way of thinking fits for the strategy that you have. And you know, that as a prefix, that to be in front of saying like, you know, maybe okay, so two cases of like successful change in a corporation, right? Like of course there's Microsoft and Apple, and then there's also kind of Amazon. I don't know. Amazon always feels like a weird case, but maybe that bears thinking about how they pulled off like doing a whole big bet thing or whatever. And it seems like if back when Horace Dediu was the Ben Thompson of the world, like, you know, he had this great chart that I've used many times that like shows the drop end user device sales, like the shift from Microsoft from Wintel ones to like iPhones, just like it happens over like 3 years, just instantly. Like
Right.
it's crazy. And like maybe the deal there is that like, so if kind of, I don't know, maybe like with metaverse stuff, if Apple had been talking like 5 years earlier that like we're doing this and here's an early prototype and we're doing that, kind of like revealing their plans, then maybe the other companies would have been like, sounds good, we're doing that too. Right. And they would have had a chance to be much more defensive and actually do things. Like, I don't know. I get the sense the BlackBerry people would have just always been like, check out these idiots or something.
Yeah,
but like,
it's never
you know,
gonna work, right? Yeah.
but you know, like Adobe was trying to be in that area. Microsoft was trying to be in that area. I mean, this is much later in it, but even Amazon was trying to be. Everyone, and Motorola, like they were all trying to do a phone. And then all of a sudden this phone comes out and it's just like, oh, well, okay, I guess that's done. And, you know, I mean, it wasn't that simple. Whereas like, again, if they had been signaling and talking about this forever, then maybe it would have created, you know, competition.
Yeah, it definitely opens some stuff. But I think, you know, kind of back to your thing about like, when should we be really evaluating strategy? Because I think, you know, it's Armchair Strategist. And I think when your core business, the time that really matters is like when your core business comes under attack and starts to show some type of decline or weakness. That is the moment that ultimately is going to reveal the expertise of the management team, right? So
yes.
the reason that we're talking about this right now is that Facebook's advertising, and we talked about this on previous episodes, through lots of reasons that have nothing to do with them. Apple changing, you know, the privacy concerns, right? So that took $10 billion of revenue right out of their top line revenue, right? And people are generally like, there's this general kind of uneasiness, or people kind of don't like the Facebook app like they once did. And you see this reflected in the stock market. You're seeing this huge drawdown because people don't believe. So now is the moment where we're like, it really matters, right? If Facebook is going to continue to have a huge valuation, it has to do something to kind of prove to the market, tell a story that we all believe in, that's going to drive it up, if that's the end goal. And because they're under attack, now is the time. Whereas Amazon and Google, for the most part, still have these incredibly strong businesses, and Apple, you know, throwing them in early, that are not under attack, right? Google search is as strong now as it's been probably ever, right? And then 90% of the revenue, if not more, comes from search ads and YouTube ads. What would change would be like if tomorrow either search went away. If Google, imagine if Apple's like, we're banning Google search on the iPhone. Like, I know that's not going to happen, but I'm just saying hypothetically, it would be a huge drop in revenue. Like they would lose all of that overnight. And then people would start to ask questions like, what are they going to do? But as long as you still have this huge outlay of your current products are working, you can rename yourself Alphabet, and you can try all kinds of stuff. Like people think that's really smart and keep doing it, right? Because they just don't, because your core business is making so much money. And Microsoft, I think, is a good example. The Wintel business came under attack. They sort of, you know, righted the ship after a long period, you know, like a little, you know, kind of found themselves in the woods with Nokia, but they got off that and they got on Azure, and now they seem as strong as ever, right? So that was really a big comeback story, I think. And we'll see, like, will Facebook have a comeback story? But I'd say Amazon and Google, to this date, they've never been tested. No one's touched their core businesses. So we'd have to wait and see, like, what would happen if you know, if one day search comes under attack. It'll be interesting to see what Google does.
Yeah, I forgot about that Nokia thing. That was kind of a big deal. But did they sell that back off? I forget what happened with that.
Well, remember they bought the phone business from Nokia, and then that became the Windows Phone, and eventually they just sort of like wrote all that off, right? And there are some other ones like Amazon. I don't think their core business has ever come attack, but we all remember the Fire Phone, right? They came out and they tried that, didn't work. Facebook tried the phone, didn't work. But those were more, I think, them trying to get heads. They still had really strong core businesses. But I think going forward, that's really what I'm watching. That's what I think, you know, with all of this and the meta stuff and too. And it's like, you know, you could at this point, right? Like you know, there's another version of this where if you're Mark Zuckerberg, you can just declare yourself, I have won, right? I have won this. I've made a tremendous amount of money. Going to continue to appoint a new CEO. They're going to run the social media business. I'm going to become chairman of that. And I'm going to detach from that. I'm going to go invest in a whole new business that's not detached from Facebook, right?
Yeah, you know, maybe this is another thing. And like, I feel bad talking about it because I don't know enough, but like, it's, you know, it's armchair strategist, like just like thought exercises. And that is, that is also like, it doesn't seem like there was any reason to be so dramatic about metaverse stuff because like no one cared, right? And so like until there was this whole switch over to it, it's not like the market and people were like hot and bothered about virtual reality stuff. It just like that desire did not exist at all, right? And so
Right.
like if the legs are false, so to speak, right? And like you're trying to generate all this interest in it, I guess, but then there's no interest. It's just sort of like, well, you can still keep doing that, just don't talk about it, right?
Right.
Like just keep working on it and working on it, and then one day, maybe people will give a shit, right?
Right, but I think you
And
have to marry that with like your. I agree with you. I know what you're saying there, but I think you come back to like if you're Mark Zuckerberg and the investment team is like they feel the need to go to the stock market and be like, we have a plan. This is our plan to go in the future. We
Right,
want
right,
to.
right.
We're gonna and like we're. I'm telling you, I need to invest. I don't know, upwards of like $20 billion in this. You're an investor in my company, so I'm telling you I'm doing this, and then I'm gonna show you what I'm doing along the way. And I want you to believe in that story, and I want you to give us a high valuation. And it's like didn't have to do that, right? You could have done it a totally separate way. To your point, like I think going one step further would be like, hey, just run the social media company, start doing stock buybacks. Be like, listen, this is a strong business. We're actually going to start buying back the stock, maybe even pay a dividend. That's why you should invest in this. And then they, Mark Zuckerberg could certainly take all harvest this
Yeah,
profits and start it to the side. But that his goal, right, is like, no, I'm going to do all of this within the same corporate entity. Not unlike Sun. Like I always think like maybe the end of Sun was everybody at Sun in that campus that Facebook has, they just literally got on what is it, the 405? I can't remember the highway there, but they got on it and then they just drove down to Google. Most of them all got jobs at Google, and it was like, wow, look at all these. I mean, because I was like, I remember going to Sun up there, and I was like, wow, there's like some really cool technology inside of that area. Like people were doing all kinds of stuff, and then eventually see a lot of that kind of like what became like Google projects, right? Like I know people don't even believe it. There's a thing called like the Sun Grid, right? And I don't know exactly how it all worked, and of course Java and like so many of that engineering expertise seemed to just make its way to Google. And then they're doing a lot with it. And that's sort of like, if you will, it wasn't like a deliberate action by Sun, but that's kind of what happened, right? It was like, oh, Google's like, we know how to make money on this technology. And, and maybe we'll see that shift happen again down the road.
All right. Well, I think, yeah, let's see what happens. As we were saying earlier, it's only stupid until it works. And if it doesn't work, it remains stupid. You start in the stupid box until you're successful. And we'll see how that pans out. Now, related, I mean, we can't let we're in an exciting time, Brandon, where crazy stuff is happening with Twitter. Just like I was right before we recorded, I was like, I got to check the news to see if anything else has happened.
Right.
I mean, it's almost I got like it's I know it's election season back in the States, midterm elections where it's not presidential elections for people who don't live there. So, it can be a depressing time where you feel like you need to check the news and see what's going on. However, I think this is delightful, right? It's like, I know there's 7,500 people at Twitter, right? Who are like probably not in a good place. Over my 20, almost, has it been 30 years, Brandon? How long have I been working? I don't know. Over my quarter of a century of working, like I've been in situations numerous times where you're just like, fuck. So there's those people, I get it. But, from the outside, it's just like, boy, this is like Christmas early just to see all this drama happening, right? And I have to admit, I mean, with Twitter, I am, it has been the source. I signed up in 2006, back when I was at Red Monk. They celebrated a 20-year anniversary recently, which is fun. And I mean, I feel like Twitter probably was a huge component of my career and my current net worth, right? Now, I have the analytics, so I'm questioning if it's currently providing that value to me. In fact, the views on the videos I post there have kind of halved year over year, and it's not like I've done anything different. The content is still fantastic, Brandon.
Of course it is.
So I don't know what's up with that. Like I get a lot less. I get about half as many views as I used to. And boy, the CTAs and Twitter stuff. Don't get me started on that. They're not that great. But it's like crazy town over there, right?
Yep.
Like, and the best one, and it looks like this is corrected. Maybe this was a false rumor. I mean, I'm like 90% don't believe this because it is so absurd that you would have to print out some code
print out your
to go
source
do
code,
a code
right?
review, and
Yeah.
it's like get a fucking tablet, man, or a big screen. Like
I think that was
Don't-
well sourced reporting, at least at
Yeah,
one point.
yeah.
I think
And-
they
and-
walked it back pretty fast. I think it was
and I
like,
think John Gruber also said that he knew people and they were printing things, and it's just like, holy crap! Like you don't print code. I mean, I kind of get it, but like the first problem. I mean, you're gonna have all the problems that anyone who's like programmed for at least 3 years is gonna tell you. Chief among them being like, well, less code is actually better, and I can't give you 5 blank sheets to show I have less code. So anyways, like that kind of stuff is just fantastic that would even be contemplated. And then of course, like parachuting in experts who have never looked at the code base. Equally good, right? It's
yeah,
just
I
like,
mean, well, that's like, to me, that is the absolute,
yeah.
as
I
I
mean,
like to say, Cote, that's like the chef kiss on
Yes,
all of that. This news is like, yeah, I mean, we all know how easy it is to parachute in and like have someone start showing you fairly complicated source code and like, being able to comment on it with any,
and I think
smart.
I don't know. I mean, the other thing with Facebook and Twitter is you have the whole ruining of culture and elections and stuff like that, which is almost its own thing over there. But it's kind of like the metaverse thing where it's like, because you're in that, you have that perception, that brand thing to deal with, it doesn't make things easier. Right? Like, so, on the other hand, if it was like, if like Twitter actually was currently in that 2000s Web 2.0 like la la land of awesomeness, and it was providing, like, if for some reason like Twitter and Facebook had increased the goodness of education globally by 5 to 10% since their founding. I don't know how they would have done this, but whatever. Had increased communication and all these things, then like maybe we would be more optimistic. I mean, on the one hand, I don't know. I don't want to get into all of that, but like there is a certain thing of like, well, we forget how bad things were. And so it's kind of like we didn't meet progress expectations. The progress growth rate has declined this quarter,
right.
and so this business is dead, right? Like we've only progressed 5% instead of 10%. So obviously things aren't working. Anyhow, you add all that together there, and man, it's just like I can't get enough news about this, Brandon.
All right, but I think let's just summarize it. I kind of feel like we'll be armchair strategists on this one too. It's like my take on the whole thing is, again, millions of people have a take on like all the potential changes. Are they good or they're bad? But let's, at the macro level, I would start with like, by must buying Twitter, it's the range of possible outcomes of Twitter have significantly changed, right? Because I think before this, it would just be Twitter is basically going to be what it's going to be, status quo. It'll maybe make a little bit of money, make a small amount of money, but the core product and its trajectory will generally kind of stay within a well-confined area, right? But now I think there is a reasonable chance it goes to zero now. Like some kind of change happens that, all the advertisers leave and we as the user base decide that we're just going to move on. Like, I think that was not the possible before. Now I think it is possible. I don't know exactly what it was. I just think that's on the table. Even if it's unlikely, it's now in our distribution graph. It is possible. And I think the other scenario around some type of reviving Vine followed by like creating a super app, like on the, like kind of like the ones they have in China, and like kind of revolutionizing the interactions in social media. Like, again, not likely, but on the table. Like something like that could potentially happen. Because you have some person up there that's going to be able to make huge changes, because before, like, the bureaucracy of a company will almost prevent it from doing that. So that to me is sort of like the poll. So you have both of those things, but I still think if we're betting, if you ask me to, like, it's almost like index fund mentality is like, no, like in the end, the status quo is always the strongest bet, right? Like people always want to come in and revolutionize a company that isn't necessarily doing well. And there's always this, like, it starts with a listening. I guess in this case, it didn't start with listening tour. It starts with lots of action, right? But then over time, you just kind of see it's like, well, it's kind of just the same. So I still think the money I have is on like just the status quo. Like, lots of things are tried, but for the most part, Twitter stays within the same valuation range. It kind of trends with the market, and nothing, necessarily radical happens, even though there will be millions of articles written about it.
Well, like it's private now, right? So
Yeah.
like we have no idea. But I think I think you're hitting on, like, we're bringing together all of these points here, right? And I want to go back to the reputation thing. Like, it seems like here's what I struggle with when thinking about the Twitter, Elon Musk, blah blah blah, whatever, right? I mean, again, clearly, like, it's a really asshole move to say you're going to fire a bunch of people right off the bat. Like, we all know it's going to be business as usual until, you get a meeting on your schedule from someone in HR you've never heard of, right? But you want to roll this along, right?
Yep.
Like, you don't just go in with a sink or whatever. And so and then you add to that the whole, like, Twitter is destroying society sort of thing. And instantly one just assumes, even I, that, like, it's just a chaos agent that's doing dumb stuff that's going to go nuts, right? Now, on the other hand, like if you can pull away from that sort of, like, brand, like, you're sort of like, well, if it seems like what you have here is the chance to, as you were saying, like, we don't want to make big bets, or as we're talking about here, we don't want to make big bets that distract from the cash cows and things like that. And instead, what you want to do is you just want to kind of, like, incrementally try to make things better. And if there's any tech, like, FANG style tech business out there, although I guess Twitter is not in FANG, you can just look at the letters there, which is exciting. But, whatever, that kind of Galloway tech company, we'll call it. Like, it seems like incremental improvements that you could probably ship every 2 weeks would, like, have a huge amount of leverage in Twitter's business, right? Like, I forget who had pointed this out, but, they bought like Git Review a while ago, and they haven't done anything with it. And, like, that's apparently a business. People will pay for that stuff, right? Like, it took them until recently you could just add in all these little features. And just like with the metaverse, you don't have to go in and be like, brah! You could just be like, oh yeah, we introduced this thing, and then
Yeah. So I mean, the question is, like, what
thing.
operational, kind of basic operational improvements can you? Obviously, you're going to reduce the headcount, and you could ship new things faster, and potentially that at least makes you a little bit more money. But I think we're all about to see it, though, because this is sort of like armchair product management, armchair CEO. It's like, this is what I believe. I believe, and this is unpopular opinion, like, Twitter has had a lot of smart people managing it. They've had multiple CEOs. They've had a lot of different VPs of product. They've had a lot of different people come in and out. And it's like, I think those people were smart. I think those people probably thought along the same lines. But when you get in there, right, and you're like, and you got to really do it, as we often find, the status quo is really, really hard. And so we're about to see, everybody thinks, Elon Musk, because he has taken it private and he has kind of a unique ability to kind of just do what he wants. But I still think the status quo is so strong that it would be difficult for him to make radical changes. And we may find out that, like, hey, it's kind of like cement. Once it's kind of cemented in, right, it's not changing really, really much, because it's like, okay, half the company leaves. Like, are you left with just a simple thing? It's like, who are you keeping, and what do those people want to work on, right? You still got to get 2,500 people all going in one direction to build something, right? And it's like, that's not an easy task.
Well, I'm giving a talk tomorrow at I think it's a Romanian conference, Peak IT, going over the work that my friend Mark Zotner and I did on the Legacy Trap book. Modernizing your enterprise giant portfolio. It's good stuff. If you want to get a copy, you can go to tanzutalk.com/videos, and there's a link to get to it. Maybe we'll put one in the show notes. It's a great report. I wrote it with my friend, but I'm realizing when we do a revision, we need to have a last chapter where there's 7 R's. I think we came up with 7 R's. I think Richard Watson and some other people
R7, baby.
Came up with 5, and you add more and more, whatever.
Yeah.
Sometimes you combine together rewrite and refactor if you're not like a super annoying pedantic nerd who wants to talk about the difference between those two. But we need to add in another one, which is go private. and I think the reason is, as you were pointing out, like, I bet there are many things you would want that seem like 15 minutes of coding that you would do at Twitter. And then the goddamn SRE people come into the room.
Yeah.
And they're just like, well, okay, I'm going to go up to the whiteboard, and you realize this, and you realize that, and you realize this. And then all of a sudden what you're looking at is like, basically, I bet they get to the point where they're like, so we're going to have 48 hours of downtime. And then the business people are like, well, what if we allow people to read Atlantic articles for free instead if they pay us $5 a month?
Yeah,
And then you're after that. And then so maybe you go private and they're like, we're going to have to take it down for 48 hours. And they're like, do it.
Yeah.
Just like,
no,
who
you're
cares?
totally right. The potential to do it, but like I think that's why that the range of outcomes around is like maybe they take it down and they come back with the greatest thing we've ever thought, and we're like, this is exactly what it. Or they take it down and they learn like, oh, wait a minute, it turns out
they can't get it back up.
Exactly. It turns out like we broke some key things, and like anyone who's worked on like systems that are orders of magnitude smaller than this, like you've seen a small change break like the entire thing, and then like take a long time to figure it out. So I don't, I mean, like everyone else, like we're just gonna watch. We're gonna watch and see what happens.
Maybe they could also in return for not having to make the interest payments on the loans, they could like give some of those banks like some blue check marks or some more followers.
That's right.
Something like that.
Hopefully Matt Levine will start writing about commodities built on blue check marks. That will be. We'll know we've crossed over officially when he makes it into his money newsletter.
It'll be like the infamous YouTube album on iPods, where they'll be like, all right, how about this quarter? We don't have to do the interest payments if everyone follows you now.
I love it. I love it.
I mean, can you put a value on that, Brandon? I don't think there's no ROI. Let's just skip this quarter's interest rates. No problem. Well, speaking of skipping this quarter's interest rates, do we have any bureaucracy this episode?
We do. Just a couple of things here. I sent some stickers to Kent in Turkey. So that's, I think, the first time I sent something to Turkey. So good to hear from him. And also sent, I think it's Dravko. Hope I did my best on that name. And I sent him some stickers. He's here in the U.S. out in Georgia. So if you would like some stickers, all you have to do is email your postal address to stickers@softwaredefinedtalk.com. And I will be happy to send you stickers anywhere in the world. And this week, I want to thank Craig. He joined the Slack as well, and a few other people. So if you want to join our Slack, just go to softwaredefinedtalk.com, click on the Slack button there, and you can just register yourself. You'll be in there looking at all the topics that we're going to talk about and all the other channels we have going. Good active week in Slack. It was fun. There's lots of different things. So if you're interested, you need another community to interact with, check out our Slack.
Well, there's several conferences coming up. There's going to be the All Day DevOps. I should have applied to speak at that. That would have been fun. That's November 10th. And also, I think tickets went on sale for that conference, if I remember. And that's going to be January 15th and 18th in Round Rock still. You can get 5% off if you use the code SDT, which is a pretty good deal there. And then Cloud Native Security Con North America is in Seattle, February 1st to 2nd. And I just happened to come across a whole big list of product management-oriented conferences that I need to go look at. And, I ask this every now and then, but I'm always looking for conferences to go speak at. And I find it very hard, since I don't program or code YAML, to find conferences that would take my kind of stuff. So anytime someone has some ideas of like conferences that I would be interested in to speak at, I'm always interested in hearing about that. And then speaking of, I mentioned this already, but if you can actually, I think you can still register for free to see the talk that I have tomorrow. If you go to peakit.ro, you can find the event there. And I'm going to be going over the modernization work, the legacy trap stuff that I had. Kind of late tomorrow for me, but you should check that talk out. And with that, what's your recommendation this week, Brandon?
All right. So a couple things I wanted to touch on. One was I would like everyone, hopefully everyone enjoyed the episode Matt and I did about kind of KubeCon and Matt's adventures there in Detroit. Also, the Cloudcast did a really good episode reviewing KubeCon. So if you didn't really go to the conference, or you did go to the conference, and you kind of want to hear like their perspective, our perspective, check out both those podcasts. It's always fun to like, after you've recorded a podcast on a subject, I like to go listen to other people's to see like, oh, like what takes did they have? So you should check out the Cloudcast. We always appreciate them mentioning us. And I think Aaron and Brian do a really good job. And then I wanted to go ahead and, I don't know if this is a recommendation or this is just more a thank you. I want to thank Southwest Airlines, the Lost and Found department specifically. So long story short, my son left his iPad on a plane. We kind of just figured it was gone, but there is a nice online service you can go through, basically say what you lost. They even ask for a few digits of the serial number, Sure enough, they found it. They called us from Alabama. And they said, we verified that we owned it. We gave them the code. We told them what the picture was, and they were like, yep, it's yours. So we sent them some money and they sent it to us. So it's great to get, this is a parent. It's almost like found gold. You're like, I got the thing back that I thought I was going to have to replace. Now, of course, it raises an ultimate parenting question we won't answer today, but it's always like, you want your children to feel responsible for the things that they have, and to make sure that they take care of them. But at the same time, you want to realize that like mistakes do happen, things get lost, and that, you shouldn't, if you will, like we talked about in the show before, like a lot of inside chatter. Like you don't want to like just be, hey, I made this mistake, and it's a lot of self-punishing because like, hey, mistake happens, and we want to like, have some resilience and move on from it, right? It's not the end of the world, right? So I always find this is a difficult moment as a parent, right? Because one instance, you want to make sure that they really felt like they lost something valuable. It's the same thing. You don't want them to like turn on it. So I don't know. I don't know if I did a good job between, making sure that there was like, hey, that was your responsibility versus like mistakes happen. Let's all move on. But in the end, we got the iPad back, and I'll be left with that parenting question for the next, I don't know, probably 30 or 40 years.
Well, there's two things. One, this reminds me, I was thinking the other day, I've actually used the Apple tags to find lost keys around the house. Are they ever my keys? I will leave the answer to that as an exercise to the listener. Like I was realizing, I bet an airport and maybe bus station, like luggage things, there's just a constant sound of AirTags beeping. Like it must just be constantly going off. I mean, you got to imagine there's always one happening there. Which whatever. And then two, I struggled with your parenting quandary just this morning in a very dramatic way, which I won't really recount. And it is, I eventually went down the being the nice person instead of the learn from consequences. And I think maybe you're making me think the principle is that like you've got to think you can't learn from a mistake if it makes you hate. Like you're not gonna, if something like makes you so upset and you're gonna be like very full of anger and hate, and like it's just like you're not gonna like process that like, oh right, that was my fault, and not even that it was my fault, it's something that I can prevent from happening again. Versus if you're just like, when I get in a depressed mood, I'm just like, well, basically just everything is gonna go to shit and collapse, right? And like in moments like that, one doesn't really like have a growth perspective on how they can become better in life. So you've got to be like,
well, I think maybe you answered it. Like you want someone to show discomfort, but not depression, right? It's like being a little uncomfortable that you made a mistake is fine. If it lends itself into that next state, it's like, maybe that's the point where you say, hey, things happen, life happens, it'll be replaced.
Right. So, especially, I mean, it's one thing, like someone in the family destroyed an Internet of Things light switch a while ago, and so we were like, oh, you got to pay for that. And it was only 20 euros, right? Not a big deal. However, if someone like destroyed like an 800 euro like iPad or laptop, and we said you got to pay for it, like we wouldn't be finished paying that off till they were like 22.
Yeah, it'd be
like,
a long, a little bit too big.
There's no way to bring that revenue in and learn from it. So you gotta
do something different for sure.
Yeah. Well, anyways, my recommendation is, I'm sure I've recommended it before, but like I went and checked out the old micro.blog again. And you know how everyone knows, especially you, Brandon, every year I switch up how I do this stuff. Just to keep people on their toes. I know it's especially good because I know that Jordy will be looking for some article that I wrote 2 years ago, and he's contact me and be like, "Where's this article? You keep changing your stuff around. I go to these URLs and I can never find it." It's always fun to know that you're read and desired as far as the content that you have. But I was thinking that I would move my blog over to it, right? Because and that's what I'm in the middle of doing, and it involves my other favorite thing, DNS, right? I'm not sure why I can't just go somewhere and click on something that says, now I want this domain to go to micro.blog.
Good old CNAME record, yep.
Yeah, I think Fireside has had the best way of doing this, and I imagine it's because Dan over there is like, I am fucking sick and tired of answering these emails, and so he just writes down every single thing. But like, Manton over there doesn't quite have the best directions, and so like hopefully it'll work. We'll see what happens. Anyways, but also it had the other thing. It's just like I've been using WordPress for a while, and they have this new block editor thing, and I was reflecting as I was thinking about this that it's just like I don't enjoy the experience of going to WordPress to publish anything. And consequently, I don't really ever do it. Whereas like with microblog, it's fast. It's really quick.
Fast and easy, yeah.
Yeah, it works out fine. Everything's cool. And it looks good. Like I don't have to think about it. So there's that. And then also if you're like all upset about all this Twitter stuff and you're interested in Mastodon, like if you pay, I forget if it's, I think the $5 a month tier, but you can totally get set up to basically have a Mastodon setup, which means you've got like, I don't really understand. I mean, I get the idea of Mastodon. I don't understand all the exact technical things, but you basically just get like an email address, except there's an @ sign at the beginning of it. And then that's your Mastodon ID. And you give that to people and then they can read it. It's really straightforward. So you can get set up with that. You can also subscribe to other people's stuff so you can read it in there. It seems cool. So, you should check that out. If like me, you like to always change these things around and putter around a bit. It's a good service. Now, speaking of good services, hopefully you've enjoyed the service we've provided for you here at Software Defined Talk. If you want to get the show notes for this episode, there's all sorts of things, much more meaty. Well, I wouldn't say much more meaty, but of a different type of meatiness than what we've talked about. You can go to softwaredefinedtalk.com /385 and find the show notes for that. All sorts of things we mentioned, go look at that. And we've also mentioned the great Slack conversations that we have that has been going well. If you go to softwaredefinedtalk.com, you can find the Slack link. I'm thinking we might need to move that to Discord at some point, Brandon. I don't know if
yeah, we'll look into it. That could be a little bit of work. And I was just gonna say, Cote, before we close out completely here, I just want to say a lot has happened on this recording today that people are not going to hear. So if you want to see a lot of behind the scenes, this is gonna be the most behind the scenes video we've ever done. You should go to the YouTube and watch it because there are going to be several long segments that will not make the edits. So that's my push for the YouTube more than ever. I'll just say this: we had a guest. We had an actual guest in the middle, unprompted. So if you want to see who it was, you should watch the video.
And I think you did a blameless postmortem.
We did a blameless. Okay, that's going to be on the video. So
and I am already reflecting on changes I can make in the system.
Yeah. So a lot happened in this episode. Go ahead.
Yeah, but you got to check that out on YouTube. Have you registered for the handle in YouTube yet, Brandon?
We did. We got the notification the other day, and
I hope we got a good one.
We've got it reserved, so we got Software Defined Talk. Surprisingly, no one had taken that. So
yeah, well,
and then I got my personal handle too, which is even better. So
as no one will be shocked to know, I could not get Cote, so I thought for about 5 minutes, and my handle is going to be, depending on how you want to say it, it's either Mr. Cote or Mr. Cote. And I think that's funny. A lot of people may not know this, but my middle name is Richard. And so that actually, whether it's Mr. Cote or just my name, as the Dutch would do it, I got that. Definitely not Herr Cote, but definitely Mr. Cote. Well, with that, we'll see everyone next time. Bye-bye.
All right. That was an epic episode. It's good, though. A lot of stuff happened in this one. It was fun. Epic. Thanks to all the people that watched on the stream. Michael, appreciate you being here. I think I saw Brian in there a little bit earlier.
So many people.
Others. So hopefully everybody, like you did actually get a lot of different things on the video this week. So hopefully you enjoyed all of those things, and appreciate you coming in a little bit early. I know it's like not a great time to. Everyone has important things to be doing at this time of day normally. So I appreciate everyone who made.
I was gonna say it's a great time for me, but apparently not. Like I don't know.
Yeah, you got a lot. Yeah, your family, your family time. So, all right. With that, I want to thank everyone for watching the stream. Thanks for supporting the show, and we'll hopefully see you next week around the same time.